Okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to look at a little bit at a different form of how to write an equation for a line. Now, you guys have worked on slope-intercept form already and that type of stuff, but there's different forms of and ways to write equations for lines, and there's a number of different ways. And some people don't get why there are certain ways to do it. Well, here's my analogy for this. Here we have, I'll bring this in here. All right, here's a can of Chef Boyardee. Okay, beef ravioli Chef Boyardee. Now, a lot of people like it, some people don't, whatever. It doesn't make any difference. But there's your beef ravioli Chef Boyardee. Now, there's lots of different types of a Chef Boyardee. It doesn't make any difference what kind you take, though, because it's pretty much all the same stuff. Here's some beefaroni stuff in a little tiny reheatable thing. Here's some mini ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Here's one of my favorites, the jumbo meatballs and spaghetti. But the thing about Chef Boyardee is it really doesn't make any difference what kind it is. They all pretty much taste the same if you actually analyze it, because it's the same type of pasta, the same sauce, the same meat, just put together in different combinations and structures. And some people have preferences and stuff like that, but if you would take any of these and put them into a blender and then looked at each one, it'd be pretty much impossible to tell which one's which, except for maybe higher concentrations of meat, like in the jumbo meatballs one. But really, there's pretty much no difference between any of them when you actually break it down to the base ingredients. So then why do people prefer certain type? Well, some people like the texture of one or the way you can eat one of them. Some people don't like the spaghetti because it's super long, so it's kind of hard for it, to eat it. Some people like the little tiny meatballs in the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Some people like the pocket idea and the beef ravioli. I mean, people have different preferences, but the thing is, it's all basically the same thing, just packaged and processed differently, but can give you the same type of information when you actually look at it. The same thing for lines and stuff like that. For lines, you guys have already done the, you've got slope intercept form. You guys have worked with that. There's also what's called the point slope form. There's also what's called standard or general form. There are so many different forms and ways to write a line, and it's all into fundamentally being the same information, but certain ways to do it just work better for what you actually want to do with it, or personal preference, or how you can actually see the stuff. Just like people have preferences with Chef Boyardee, some people have preferences of how they do the lines. And for certain things with lines and how you write lines and the formulas for lines, there are certain things that you can do with certain forms that you can't do with other forms. Okay, for example, if you eat the Chef Boyardee with spaghetti and you put part of the spaghetti in your mouth, you can slurp up the rest and suck it up. That's really, really hard to do with ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. Okay, so there's certain advantages and disadvantages for each form of Chef Boyardee. There's certain advantages and disadvantages of the different ways to write lines and stuff like that. And there's more than just these three, but these are three of the more common ones. And depending on what you want to do with it, the application of it, different forms have different advantages and uses, and you can see different things. So that's what you guys are going to be doing next, is going past the slope intercept and start looking at other ways to write lines. Now, you guys have done a bunch of focus with the slope intercept, but what you guys are going to get into next more is what's called the point slope form of a line, which actually comes from the basic expression of how to find slope in the first place. Of course, slope is delta y over delta x. If you expand that out, it looks something like this, and we have been using this a lot already. And then let's just get rid of this middle part. If you then rearrange this a little bit, if you multiply both sides by the denominator, and you can put some brackets, some people like it in brackets. If I wanted to bring this to their side, I can multiply both sides by this, or just take the x2 minus x1. I can take this and I can bring it up here to where the m is. So if I do that, I've got this, something like that. And that is what is called the point slope form. Typically, it's written with these two reversed, but that is what's called the point slope form, which is often used in order to write it if you know the slope and you happen to know one of the points, and that's why it's called point slope form. You have a point and you have a slope, and you can put that in there. And sometimes you'll put in the values for these guys for x1, y1, sometimes x2, y2, but this is the form that we are going to be looking at next. Okay, so we're going to go to a practice sheet and sort of see how this works a little bit. You should have already seen some stuff in your book, maybe a video about how this all ties together. But that's, some people, again, don't get why there's so many different ways to write lines. There's just different information you can gather, but fundamentally it ends up being the same type of thing at the baseline. Okay, so let's go to a sheet and just practice working with some of this. Okay, so here we have a point slope form practice sheet, and of course they have the expression up here, very similar to what we had before. I don't like the way they have the brackets laid out in this one. I find it a little bit misleading. I'd rather write it something like this. I like to set my brackets more that way. I think that makes a little more sense to me visually. I don't like the double brackets on the right and only having the one bracket. I just like it this way instead, but it doesn't make that much difference. But now what we're going to do is we're going to practice just piecing this together and writing it in point slope form, and then we're going to solve for y, which means actually we're going to put it into the slope intercept form, and a little practice just rearranging things. So here we got the slope, we got the point. Basically all we have to do is plug and play is basically what it is. So I'm just going to start by writing out my expression, which is this, and now I just have to put in the values. That's all I have to do. So for my slope, that's 7 over 8. That just goes where this is, and then I've got x and y values right there. So my first one here, this would be y minus my y1, or my y value I have is -7, so that's take away 7. I'm going to put that in brackets because I got to be careful with my negative. And then I've got my slope is 7 over 8. And then I've got my x take away, and my x1 value is -8. So I got to be careful with that negative again. So I'm going to make sure I put little brackets around it, something like that. Okay, so there's my basic setup right there. So now I can actually simplify this a little bit. I got those two negatives to make it positive. So this would be y plus 7 is equal to 7 over 8. Those become positive, x plus 8, something like that. And right there, that would be the fundamental point slope form of the actual line itself. Okay, and then what you would do is, drop the brackets around the y plus 7, multiply the 7 over 8 by the x plus 8, and then change it. That was what you would do to change the slope-intercept form, but we're just going to leave that alone for now. We're just going to focus on the point slope setup for now. Okay, so let's go to the second one over here. Okay, we can start with the expression y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. Okay, so I got my y take away 7. That's my y value. My slope is -1, so I'm going to write the -1. And then I've got x minus x1 is -6. And since negative, I'm going to put in brackets, so I make sure that negative is nicely attached to it. Okay, so now let's piece some things together. There's not much to do here. You got the -1. Some people would write the 1, some people don't. It doesn't make that much difference. You could just leave it as negative, but some people like the 1 in there. It doesn't matter. And then you'd have x, and then the negatives become positive, so plus 6, something like that. So now if I did convert this one into the slope-intercept form, if I did solve for y, I can do that. I'm just going to do it over on the side here. I've got the y minus 7. I'm just going to rewrite it over here, equals -x plus 6. Okay, well I can drop the brackets over here. That doesn't matter. And then if I multiply the -1 times this, I'd have -x, not plus, minus 6, like this. I want to get the y all by itself, so I'd have to add 7 to both sides, so that would cancel out this. And that'd be -x, add the 7, so that would be plus 1. So I've got y equals negative x plus 1, and that would be slope-intercept form. That's solving for y, which then puts it in that slope-intercept form, which you guys have used before. Okay? All right. So we can then try a couple others. Let's move down a little bit here. All right. So for this one right here, we've got a slope of 1/2, 0.27. Again, we can start with just the expression itself. We already have we wrote the expression up in the first ones. Okay, something like that. So it's the same type of thing. We could just sort of jump a little bit here if it's okay. Don't have a lot of room to work with. So anyway, if we would do that, it'd be y minus the y value I have here is 7, and that's going to be equal to my slope, which is 1/2, and it'd be x minus 2, something like that. And that would be my point slope form. Okay, and then if I want to, I could convert this into the other form as well, into slope-intercept form. Okay, but we're not going to do that. We'll jump to this one over here. Okay, same type of thing. So we got y, take away 2, slope is 4, x, take away 1, everything nice and positive, which makes it easier, and we got this. And we will convert this one into slope-intercept form. So I can drop the brackets on my left-hand side, so that's y minus 2. Multiply this one out, so that'll be 4x take away 4. I want to isolate my y, so I have to add 2 to both sides. So it'll be 4x minus 2, and that would be my solving for y or slope-intercept form. Okay, all right, so let's go down to this one. Okay. So we've got y take away negative 2, so be careful with the negatives. It's equal to negative 1, x minus negative 2, careful with negative. All right, so I'm going to simplify this one at least a little bit here. So this would be y plus 2 over here equals, you can write the 1 if you want to. I'm going to drop the 1, and it'd be something like that. Okay, and then you could solve for in terms of y, but we'll save that for right-hand side. Okay, for this one here, we've got y take away negative 7 equals negative 1/2. We've got x take away 8. Okay, so I'm going to simplify this a little bit. This would be y plus 7 equals negative 1/2 x minus 8. All right, this one I am going to solve for. All right, so drop the brackets, and I'd have y plus 7 is equal to, I'm going to multiply the negative 1/2 for both of those. So that would be negative x over 2. Okay, that's negative 1/2 x. And then we multiply that, so we plus 1/2 times 8 would be 4. So that's plus 4, something like that. Okay, and then we'd minus 7 from both sides, so y is equal to, and you don't have to write this like this. You could write it as negative 1/2 x. Some people prefer it one way or the other. It doesn't matter too much. I can move it back like that if you want. We add, minus 7 from both sides, so that'll be negative 1/2 x, take away, we've got 4, take away 7, so minus 3. Okay, and that's what it would be in slope-intercept form. Okay, all right. Okay. All right, for this one here, we've got the same type of thing going on. There's not too much difference, the same type of thing over and over again. You can try some more. The answers for these should be a little bit further down, but that just gives you an idea of how to do these types of questions. Okay, so again, a little Chef Boyardee action, a different form of the equation, and we even looked at how to switch from one to the other. And often, you could get point slope form by using a line on a graph or something like that will also work. There's different ways you can do it.